Of this chaos, it's the reason why some retailers like Target are not taking action.
Overnight, Philadelphia police responding to a chaotic scene. Large crowds of young people looting stores and damaging property. Authorities say they hit multiple locations, including a Lululemon, Foot Locker, and Apple store. Police making more than 20 arrests, but dozens likely got away. These kinds of smash and grab crimes have become all too common, forcing a growing number of retailers to try to combat the thefts. This morning, one of them, Target, is taking drastic action to reduce retail crime. The company announcing it'll shut down 9 stores by the end of October. 3 in both San Francisco and Portland, 2 in Seattle, and 1 in New York City. The company blaming the closures on theft and organized retail crime, threatening the safety of our team and guests.
This is crazy. They're locking up the toothpaste.
The move comes after videos from inside Target stores went viral, showing everyday items locked behind security glass, frustrating shoppers.
Since when did my local Target start locking everything up?
Those locked cases, just one of the ways the retailer says it tried to deal with shoplifting, saying despite our efforts, we continue to face fundamental challenges to operating these stores. Target is not alone. In 2021, Walgreens closed 5 locations in San Francisco over shoplifting fears. And while Walmart and Nordstrom have also closed some locations in major cities, neither blamed crime. Still, in a newly released survey conducted by the National Retail Federation, 88% of responding retailers said shoplifters have become more aggressive, and 28% say they had to close some locations due to crime.
Retailers are experiencing unprecedented levels of theft, crime, and violence in their stores.
Now, as another major retailer shuts down stores, retail crime threatens to knock the industry off target.
The National Retail Federation says retailers have lost more than $100 billion because of thefts and robberies like those smash and grabs. All of this happening right before the Christmas holiday season gets ready to ramp up. Back to you.
Miguel Almaguer, thank you. That does it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you back here tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, I'm Ana Cabrera reporting from New York. Jose Diaz-Balart picks up our coverage next.
I want to back up here just a little bit and doing a refreshing.
Jose Diaz-Balart breaking right now. New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez.
And doing a refreshing course. I don't think it's going to let me.
More of his fellow Democrats demand he resign. Breaking overnight, an American soldier detained in North Korea.
All right, I'm just going to talk about it then. The problems with smash and grab is obvious a ongoing concern that's happening here in America that's now relentlessly expanding or growing, evolving, even every day as we see people's finances becoming more and more abrupt, people understanding that our government has in fact failed us in not only protecting us from various entities, regardless whether it be the entity of a disease, or the entity of a hacker, or the entity of bad politics towards making bad decisions for the innocent, based around people that can't defend themselves towards getting good representation. Again and again, we see where the American government has failed the American people. There's certain reasonable ways to deal with this rather than dealing with it in a violent, hostile way, which is basically taking America 1 step forwards and 2 steps back. All the people that have been in support of a madman, as far as I'm concerned, Donald J. Trump, that tried to manipulate and lie to the American people again and again and again, that the election had been stolen, still has yet to give a full accountability in what that he created January the 6th pertaining to a insurrection that happened up at the White House. That now, I guess hundreds, if not thousands, have been either charged or prosecuted because of this particular event. Even to this day, since 1988, whenever 9 tapes went to the White House, people have still not given an account, proper account, towards what didn't happen that should have happened during that time. Because of that event, that was the core of origin that began right here in Northwest Tennessee. Because of that event, has placed us in regards towards seeing all the chaos and now all the snatch and grab. And I don't know, they're coming out with a new vaccination shot this year pertaining to COVID. I'm sure there'll be lots of debate and contradicting statements over that pertaining to whether or not the vaccination is making things either worse or better. The whole environment is an environment of anarchy. And this is exactly what the devil wanted to do to begin with, that thought that he was going to be able to undermine the American people and undermine especially the good Christian American people here in America. This is the results from that. And until we're willing to back up and look at things in a different perspective, this thing is only going to constantly regurgitate itself again and again and again until I'm afraid the ultimate end game will probably be bloodshed that could reach the levels of possibly even a civil war. If we're not smart enough and intelligent enough to comprehend not only what has occurred, what is occurring, but what possibly may actually occur. It is getting to the thick of it.
Do you mean resign?
Yeah, I think Senator Menendez needs to resign. Innocent until proven guilty. And the only thing I can tell you, this is between the people in New Jersey and Senator Bob.
Let me reform my statement. It is getting to the thick of it to the point that now it is basically completely, totally out of control. And of course, whenever they're talking about, it's not just the potential probability of the government shutting down, but now they're saying more than likely it is very probable that the government was shut down because of the chaotic state that right now that we are in. This is what happens to a group of people that decides that they're going to do something like they done in the late 80s that now has caught up with them. And I'm just so thankful of the good people that are out there, that does listen, that does pray, that is looking for the righteousness of God in the I want to say ingenuity, in the manifestation of trying to be a better people, a better community, a better person, a better nation, a better planet. I just thank God that there are people out there that still are good people, good-minded people, and they're not narrow-minded people. They can see all perspectives of the things that I continue to keep talking about, and maybe there is hope on the edge of the horizon. But if we don't pull together in manufacturing some sort of a movement in those regards, I'm just afraid that the bad is going to insert its pain and anguish upon to the lives of the innocent to the point that it could actually get totally out of control. This is the state that we are in right now, folks. Regardless whether you like it or not, this is where we are. Now, you can either be like an ostrich and take your head and stick it in the sand, continue to keep your hands tucked up underneath your hips and not saying nothing, not doing nothing, because you're scared that if you stick your neck out a little bit, that somebody's going to slander you, or somebody's going to be opposed to you, or whatever. You can continue to do what you're doing, and in essence, you're going to continue to get the same results, or you can make a movement in standing up, in being a good patriot for good Samaritans here in America, and in doing the proper and right thing. This is the information that I continue to put out to my viewing base here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, and I continue to get absolutely zero results. Zero results. In other words, nobody is standing with me. Nobody is making a telephone call. Nobody is saying, Dennis, you're in constant prayer with us. Dennis, we not only support you spiritually, but morally, but we're going to support you literally in the things that you have been talking about and the things that you're embarked up into. I have not gotten that response. So because I haven't gotten that response, proof is in the pudding, per se, the way that one of my prior representatives told a federal judge up in Paducah, Kentucky by the name of Wildesworth out of Louisville, Kentucky, proof is in the pudding, Your Honor, towards what we're looking at in whatever direction that you want to look at it. That proof is in the pudding, Your Honor. And whenever he said that to the federal judge in Paducah, Kentucky, while I was standing there, and the judge was absolutely dismayed towards what kind of good credits and what kind of good marks that I had gotten from a doctor up in MCC in downtown Chicago. He was absolutely appalled at the fact that he was having to compliment me rather than degrading me of this particular event up in Paducah, Kentucky, pertaining to LBL, Land Between the Lakes. So once more, proof is in the pudding, just like Wildesworth. I don't know where the name come from. It sounds Irish to me. Just like Wildesworth said to the federal judge, that proof is in the pudding, Your Honor, towards what we're seeing and what we're observing. And I think one of the main courses that he was talking about was pertaining to Mr. Jackson, Mr. Dennis James Jackson, also known as Juby, the individual that's talking in behind the microphone right now. He was talking in response towards me being mentally incompetent or crazy. That was how that come to that particular heading at that particular subject matter with that particular federal judge up in Paducah, Kentucky. And it's really sad to watch how the church industry, the church world, has sat idly by and allowed for this to get this far out of hand. It's really sad.
Lives in a, quote, fantasy world. Now we're just 3 days away from a government shutdown with no clear path to a deal. What needs to happen to an agreement coming forward? We're back in 60 seconds. You're watching Jose Diaz-Balart Reports on MSNBC.
You know, what needs to happen is what should have already happened. Somebody should have come to a neutral agreement.
When he ran across the border
in being able, I don't know what the deal is with this soldier right here, but I don't know if he got lost his way. I don't know if he should be declared, if he went AWOL. I don't know what the deal is with him.
It's all played out. The Swedes, they are the protecting power for the U.S. inside North Korea since we don't have formal diplomatic relations or an embassy in that country. China, obviously a bordering country with close relations with the North Koreans. And we're also hearing just in the last few minutes from a spokesman for the mother of Travis King, Claudine Gates. And she says, in the statement from the spokesperson says, Ms. Gates will be forever grateful to the United States Army for all its interagency partners for a job well done. The statement goes on to say that the mother does not intend to be giving any interviews about what has happened to her son. But in the meantime, some major questions we expect to learn more about in the coming hours, such as what is the condition of Travis King? How is he doing? Did he actually want to come home? And of course, what did the U.S. have to give North Korea, if anything, as a concession in order to bring him home? A lot of these questions still swirling right now. Hopefully more information coming very shortly.
Josh Lammer, I thank you so very much. Right now, a pretrial conference is underway in the New York civil case against Donald Trump and his family business. One day after the judge overseeing the case dealt a major legal blow to the former president, the judge found Trump, his two eldest sons, and his company liable for fraud for misstating the true value of multiple properties for years and grossly overstating the former president's net worth. The judge also canceled Trump's business certificates. The ruling paves the way for a trial to begin next week in the $250 million civil suit brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James. Trump's lead attorney says Trump and his family will appeal the decision. In a statement posted on his social media site, Trump called the decision ridiculous and a witch hunt. With us now to talk more about this is New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig, who has spent years digging into Donald Trump's businesses and finances. So it's good to see you. Just how significant is this ruling, you think?
I think it's really significant. I mean, if he faces now a situation where a receiver is going to be placed in position to control certain of his assets, in New York, and he's going to trial on Monday where penalties are going to be talked about, and they could run up to $250 million. And I don't think this is a case where, sometimes you hear somebody's going to face up to 20 years in prison and they get 5. I mean, we're looking at a case, given what happened yesterday, where he was found liable on the main count in this lawsuit, where those penalties are probably, if not going to hit 250, are going to hit close to it. But he's now got a receiver on top of a number of his assets. And that doesn't mean, I think there's a lot of images when you hear this, that there's going to maybe be padlocks on the door at Trump Tower. That's not what's going to happen. But a receiver will now be in control of assets while this plays out in court.
So what does that mean? In other words, a receiver essentially assumes the position of manager of some of the properties?
Yeah, he loses control, and a manager will step in, and I think that will probably go on for some time while this plays out in court. But ultimately, he's not. There could be a situation where this is thrown out. But what will likely play out is that the receiver will be in place for some time. The receiver will be a steward of those properties, and that's in the interest of the taxpayers of New York, because eventually there will be a resolution, and let's say if it goes to the point where he has to pay a penalty, those assets could then be sold to pay that penalty. So you want those assets performing, and you want them with value. So if they are sold, it can go to pay the penalty. And if there's excess, who knows where Trump could get some of that, but they want to make sure that they've got assets to pay that penalty because it is so large.
And this is really focused strictly on New York, this whole legal process.
That's correct. And he's got, not insignificant assets in New York. When you think of what he has, he's got the commercial space at Trump Tower. He's got 40 Wall Street. He's got, an estate in Bedford. It's empty, but he's got that's worth, I'm not exactly sure, but $10-15 million. So he's got not insignificant assets in the state. A lot of his assets are outside of New York. We're looking at golf courses and Mar-a-Lago and those sort of things. But he does business in New York State, and he is no longer in business in New York State in terms of, this lawsuit takes the control away from he and his family members, except notably for Ivanka Trump, who is not part of this. She can still continue to do business in the state.
So the fact that the judge, and I don't know if he canceled his business certificates, what does that mean?
But it goes back, it's all kind of one of a piece. I mean, he is now in a position where a receiver is going to be over these businesses and they can't conduct business in the state. They are fighting this in courts. There will be appeals, But in the meantime, when these things happen, they don't usually say, well, the fraudsters can stay in charge while the appeals play out. That's not going to happen. The receiver is going to be put in place and will be overseeing the operation of these assets while this plays out. And Monday is going to be another day we should be looking forward to. It's, October 2nd on Monday. There's still going to be a trial happening, even though this main count has been decided. It's a civil trial. It's from the bench. There's no jury. So the judge said, what he essentially said yesterday was, I don't need a fraud case. I've decided. The evidence was overwhelming, but other charges will proceed. The main is going to be to determine what the fine or the penalty will be from. But there's a few other charges on the insurance front that will be heard in front of the judge. And that starts Monday.
Suzanne Craig, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Up next, 7 Republican candidates are set to square off in tonight's presidential debate in the fight for second place. You're watching.
And a part that's even almost as sad pertaining to the cover-up that began in the late 80s in the ending of the Cold War pertaining to the superpowers. But the fact that the Republican Party still refuses to dump this guy, which makes me really, really wonder if the whole time that they haven't been the scoundrels that was supporting Donald J. Trump in his endeavors towards how that he was going to go up against the American people's will in overtaking the government in the form that he was trying to do pertaining to the insurrection. But then again, I get to thinking, well, wasn't this the same group of people, the same party of people that went up against God's will, against the Christianity will, in proclaiming one thing with the Reagan administration, but doing just the very opposite towards not being open and not being clear to the American people, and how that Ronald Reagan ever pulled that off to begin with? Sure they are. Same group of people. And the truth be known, some of them has been in power now as long or even longer than what Ronald Reagan was in power in. Ronald Reagan was in power for 8 years. Then here come the Bushes that come under the coattail of Ronald Reagan. And the bottom line is this: Ronald Reagan basically looked like a hero whenever Hinckley tried to shoot him. And Ronald Reagan did take on a bullet, but recovered and bounced right back, and within, I guess, a matter of 2 weeks was back in the seat of the White House. That was an automatic win towards Ronald Reagan getting and becoming the elected president the second time. So basically what happened was, not only did the Republican Party not do the right thing in the latter part of Reagan's era, but then turned around and put one of their cronies in power that was the vice president of Ronald Reagan, coming under the coattail of him, that basically, I guess the right word would be fraudulently put somebody in power that never should have been in power, in a sense, towards stealing that particular position, using Reagan of his accomplishments for a headstone, for a prying tool, and now to this day they still have yet to come clean. So whenever I talk about the things that I talk about, they're actually in-depthly deep, because they're not just affecting my life. They're not just affecting this particular community's lives. It's not just affecting the state of Tennessee pertaining to their lives. What is it, 7 million people? We're talking about 200 and something million people, I think it is, or whatever. We're talking about a lot of lives that has been affected because of this. And of course, by putting us illegitimately in these positions that we're in, regardless whether it's because of internet pertaining to artificial intelligence, or $30+ trillion in debt that now they're discussing towards shutting down the government again. Regardless, it has compounded with problem after problem after problem after problem that has basically exacerbated most people's imaginations to the point of overwhelming the American people. This has overwhelmed the American people to the degree that they really don't know what to believe or who to believe. This is the atmosphere that the Republican Party has created. But on the same token, I can look back throughout those years and say, well, it was the Democrat Party that never did stand up in identifying the truth and never did expose those that was involved in that properly and professionally to the American people. So one party is just as guilty as the other party, as far as I'm concerned, that neither party is worthy of holding their position. And it's created an atmosphere of anarchy. And this is what our ancestors always ruled against, because anytime you go into a court of law, it's always about order. 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 And whenever our American government is no longer functioning under the pretense of order, then our government is operating under the pretense of abnormality. Abnormality is a weakness. It has always been looked upon as being a weakness, and it will continue to be looked upon as being a weakness. This is one of the reasons why that I use the Heavenly Father pertaining to the commandments of God.
Going to be a last chance to try to cut into Donald Trump's massive lead. For Trump, who is skipping...
Towards it being a good example pertaining to order. God's plans for humanity has never changed. God's recommendations or his requirements for humanity has never changed. God's commandments has never changed. God's promises have never changed. God's his integrity has never changed. You know why? Because God is a God of order. Not disorder, but order. And anytime a nation starts reeking or regurgitating itself upon the facts of disorder, then that great nation is no longer functioning the way that this great nation was supposed to be functioning under. It was the Union that come down and defeated the Confederacy South, that demanded order, that told the Southerners how they was going to eat the cabbage. So the Southerners sat back and said, okay, take hold. Grab a hold of the wheel. You're in charge, Captain. You're in charge, Chief. Well, we can see now, after the events that took place that ended the Civil War, of what has occurred and what is occurring and what possibly may occur if we continue on this road of doom and gloom. My Good Samaritan stances was obviously either ignored, mocked, or manipulated in the fact that nobody wanted to recognize, especially the church world in this particular area. I can't speak about other areas, but this particular area in Northwest Tennessee basically made a mockery out of its own self by not doing the proper and right thing. And whenever I'm talking about people not responding properly in an orderly fashion, I'm just not talking about deacons or preachers or Christians. I'm talking about mayors. I'm talking about governors. I'm talking about judges. I'm talking about attorneys. I'm talking about the system in and of itself has caused this. And now, to the magnitude, we are seeing the system regurgitating itself up onto the American people, which is very, very unfair, especially to those that didn't have nothing to do with this, because it was the Republican Party who basically thought that they was going to be able to pull the wool over not just the Christian world, but also the world itself. And because of it, chaos has not just struck in the American people's lives, but chaos has struck in all over the planet. That if we don't watch, we are heading down a road of doom and gloom because of. And it's really sad. I don't think you can get any much sadder than the state that we're in right now, that even the prior Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, continues to keep telling people about that this is not a gluttonous, boastful time for America to be thinking that they have done really, really well, similar towards how the American people done shortly after the 2 atom bombs was dropped of the ending of World War II. That was a time to gloat. That was a time to brag. That was a time to stick your chest out and to say God was on our side and we done the proper and right thing, and because of it our enemies have been defeated. We're not dealing with the same type of equations or dynamics here. We're dealing with a complete different set of dynamics that have been brought upon by certain people that thought that they was going to be able to get away with what that they have done. And now the individual that's talking in behind the camera right now continues to tell you you're not going to get away with it. You can continue to want to degrade, dehumanize, demonize God's children all you want. But the bottom line is this country has been taken over by an evil entity. And until we're willing to take our country back over and putting the right people in the right positions to fix the damages that has been done, we are going to continue to go backwards, spiraling into a state of catastrophe. And I think there's other people out there that can now witness and say the same things, that not only was the Republican Party involved, not only was the Democrat Party involved, but a great deal of the media at that time was involved. Like I said, white man speaketh with forked tongue. They wanted to talk about peace, but then within just a few months or a year later, here come the Bushes towards wanting to go to war with Desert Storm and Desert Shield, Saddam Hussein. And I'm not saying that Saddam Hussein was an angel, because he was by far an angel. Saddam Hussein was a warrior that was trying to take care of the situation with a bunch of people that was out of control. And whenever you're dealing with people that's out of control, like Saddam Hussein was dealing with, you have to use brutal, more persuasive measures, and that's exactly what Saddam Hussein was doing to try to keep his people in check. As soon as we went over there and basically eradicated Hussein, that created a vacuum or a hole to where now all those terrorists basically moved into that same area. And today, instead of it being more stable, as Dick Cheney wanted to use the excuse of, towards going up against the axis of evil, and bringing a region to a more stability region. Now it has become more unstable, and we are seeing the repercussions of this again and again and again, regardless whether it be in that area or Iran or the area of Afghanistan, or the area of China versus Japan, or the area of Russia, now pertaining to the people over there that they're fighting, the Ukrainians, or people down in the South Horn of Africa versus the North Horn of Africa, where they've recently just got through being hit by more catastrophes, but still in a process of a civil war themselves. We are seeing these events, in a sense, escalate, getting worse, not better. Just like the mayor in New Orleans declaring a state of emergency because now the Mississippi River, once more, has become so low, and because the forces of energy have lessened to the point that now the Gulf water, that is salt water, is now seeping into the areas on the lower part of the Mississippi that is and could possibly contaminate freshwater supplies going into their aqueducts down below the ground. I could go on and on and on in response towards what has occurred that should not have ever occurred, that people thought that they was going to get away with, beginning in Obion County in a little town called Kenton, Tennessee, that then spread abroad, especially in 205, whenever some people in Martin, Tennessee, working for the Martin PD, pertaining to Chief David Moore and Tommy Moore, that thought that they was sure enough going to end the Windmill Ministries legacy in trying to put Dennis James Jackson, known as Juby, into not just a category of being mentally incompetent, but trying to put him in a category now of being a homegrown terrorist by charging him with falsifying files. Because that event happened in my life in 205, it snowballed into the event that took place in my life in 207 up in western Kentucky, around Grand Rivers, Kentucky, and Livingston County, and up around Benton, Kentucky, pertaining to what was going on in my life in LBL. Because that event happened, it snowballed even further into a group of people that was dead set in wanting to destroy my life in character assassination. Whenever I went down to Texas, stayed for 3 days and 3 nights on the Mount Carmel, Waco compound, and then went up into Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and investigated the Oklahoma bombing, that basically a group of people thought that they was going to be able to plant a bomb in the back of my truck and get away with it, towards exploding activating the bomb, and then putting me all over national news towards trying to implement me towards me being a monster. And the whole time, the people that was the monsters was the people that was trying to image me or put me in the category of being a monster. Because I knew that there was a lot more to the Oklahoma bombing incident than met the eye. And that's the reason why I had to roll up my sleeves and basically become a journalist investigator, in which you don't have to have no license for. You don't have to go to school for. That's part of their criteria. That's part of their job. It's kind of like last night I was listening to a program coming out of WPSD, Channel 6 News, pertaining to a deputy who had gotten shot by a inmate, that obviously somebody did not check the inmate good enough towards doing a frisk, and the inmate the whole time had a gun, even though they was trying to compromise with the inmate towards giving him whatever he wanted. He wanted to go outside, he wanted a drink of water, he wanted something else, and he wanted a cigarette. Then later he wanted another cigarette. But once he got outside, he pulled the gun on the pistol and killed that guy. And of course, in response, the deputies had to kill the inmate. I think he took on something like 12 or 11 or 9 shots, and one of them was in the head that basically was the lethal shot. The woman that come on WPSD last night explained very, very thoroughly that they was not trying to ridicule no one, but that their job is to bring forth the facts in trying to make sure that a breach like that never took place in regards towards nobody fully doing a shakedown on that individual to make sure that he did not have a gun before he was put in handcuffs and later pulled a firearm on a deputy and killed him. It was a very, very intense investigation, and basically the people at WPSD Channel 6 News let the public know that this was not something casual. This was not something that they was doing just for popularity purposes as far as ratings, that this was something that they had to do because they felt that it was their responsibility and job to do. The same way with the Windmill Ministries. If I did not feel that it was my responsibility towards going down to Mount Carmel in Waco, Texas, and then evolving up to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and checking all the check marks and identifying that there was a cover-up, that the officials in Oklahoma as well as Texas was not exposing the whole truth to the American people. Because if they had of, I truly believe to this day that there would have been a different outlook. There would have been a different opinion. There would have been a more thorough investigation in the who, the why, the how come, the where, and etc. that went on, bringing both episodes into one. Kind of like the Hatfields and McCoys. I'm using the Hatfields and McCoys as an example, but there's other examples out there that you can bring two incidences into one that basically tells a better picture than keeping the two entities separated apart. Which puts us right back where we are today in a government that is out of order. And how many times have you been or seen on TV where they was having a mock-up trial, and all of a sudden the crowd got disorderly, and all of a sudden the judge immediately had to start hitting the gavel, order, order, order. That's what our Constitution is based off of, order. Whenever this government is no longer functioning under the pretense of order, then this government is operating under the pretense of abnormal. Abnormality is a weakness. Abnormality is a division. Abnormality shows division. It shows confusion. It shows a form of weakness. And anytime you have a government that is not pulling together in an orderly form, then you have a government that is disorder. And then you have a government that becomes very, very weakened because it's no longer standing together. It's no longer united. That's what we're dealing with because of certain things that has happened in the past.
The Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans with McConnell and House Democrats. And then you've got this extreme wing in the House Republican caucus that is really holding the country hostage.
So, Congressman, at this time tomorrow, your colleagues on the, well, of course you'll be there, but the colleagues on the Oversight Committee will be holding the first hearing in the Republican impeachment inquiry into President Biden. What can we expect to see here?
Well, first of all, it just shows you the Republican priorities. Instead of worrying this week about making sure our troops get paid, making sure federal employees get paid, they are engaged in theatrics of going after President Biden. There is no evidence there that the president has done anything wrong. There are issues with his son, who we know had an addiction and had to overcome that, and that is being handled appropriately by law enforcement agencies. The American people don't want us politicizing that. They want us keeping the government running and open.
And what is the Democratic strategy?
The American people want order. That's what he just said. The American people want things to be run in an orderly fashion.
The president's son, without any of the goods on actually showing that the president or anyone in the White House did something wrong. There are many cases in this country. People know they have a family member or a friend who suffered from addiction. No one has a perfect family. We've had that before, even with presidents' families. And I don't think the American people want us focused on that. They want us focused on their issues.
Congressman Ro Khanna, I always appreciate you being with us. Thank you for your time.
Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our endeavors. And good luck each and every one of us towards where we go from this moment on. God bless our troops. And good luck to all of us. Shalom.